Hello to everyone. My name is Gianmario Verona and I'm Rector of Bocconi University. I'm extremely pleased to launch today a new interactive format with a weekly meeting. It's called Executive Chat Live. Executive Chat has been a format we developed 3 years ago at Bocconi University in order to interact with some important executive and policymakers leading important institutions and somewhat connected to Bocconi University. And during the pandemic, during the COVID-19 pandemic, was very important to us to start over with a new format, discussing problems and opportunities behind this new emergency, and particularly transforming the format into a live session. And given that we start today, we couldn't but starting with the importance of science that has contributed so much and substantially to the solution of the pandemic. And more importantly, sees universities in the first row with their scientists and also with the transformation that they had to develop in order to continue their job in distance learning. And so I have the privilege today to have two guests that are two important deans from two international schools. First of all, let me introduce you Francesca Cornelli, who is currently Dean of Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University.
Hi, everybody. As a proud Italian and Kellogg alumna, Bocconi alumna, of course, I'm happy to say to everybody, hello to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. Francesca is currently the Donald Jacob Chair of Finance at Kellogg, and she's well known for her research in corporate governance, private equity, privatization, and bankruptcy. And she worked for many years at London Business School, where she served also as Deputy Dean. We have a second guest, and the second guest is Giovanna Iannantuoni, Rector of Università degli Studi of Milano Bicocca, a relatively young university which is already super accomplished in many departments.
Yeah, hi everybody. Me too. I am a Bocconi alumna, so it's really a pleasure to be here. And as Gianmario was saying, we have just 20 years, but we really worked hard to be an internationally recognized institution.
So Giovanna is a professor of economics. She's an expert of game theory. And before joining Bicocca, she worked in Cambridge and in Madrid. And what I love of Francesca and Giovanna is that again, they are both leading to important institutions. So we'll have the chance also to talk a little bit about the fundamental gender diversity gap, which is an issue we have to solve for the years to come. And they for sure have solutions, given also their position. And as they both said, I like to remark that they are both Bocconi alumni because they both got their bachelor in economics at Bocconi. But having said this, let me get started with this conversation. And given that Italy has been probably the first Western country to be hit by the pandemic, let me get started with Giovanna. And Giovanni, what can university bring home from this pandemic?
Yeah, Gianmario, this is true. Milan, in particular, Lombardy, was hit from the mid of February by this pandemic. And so we decided, as you know, because as rectors of Lombardy's universities, we really work together. And this is very important, cooperation in this moment. So we decided to go online with our teaching, for example, and also to take our administrative staff at home. Of course, Bicocca is a multidisciplinary university, so we have medicine, we have a lot of our sciences departments, and the labs in these departments were open through these 2 months. So I had to take care about, of course, the health of my community. So to work with numbers, so that numbers were low, and especially the density of people in my 33 buildings could be low enough to ensure health. But at the same time, we worked a lot. And so as university, I really think that as this virus is evolving, we have to evolve more than the virus. We have to be cleverer. And this is what I'm trying to do as rector, to work to keep my my laboratory open to work. Now we'll talk later about particularly what we are doing about research against this virus, but we have to take care about the health of our students and our community. This is the challenge. And Bicocca, you know, is a big university because we are 40,000 people, so we have to take care about a big community. And we'll talk about how we did this. Now we are already, and this is the difference with US, we did a step, right? So numbers are lowering, but this managing this situation is even harder because, you know, in the first months, in these 2 months, we have just to take care of people who were home and so on and so forth. Now instead, we have to open a little bit more, being sure that we do this in security, in full security. So the evolving, keep evolving is my mantra in these months.
So evolution and cooperation, for sure, two fundamental things that we are living in Milan, Lombardy, and I'm sure all over the world. And Francesca, again, same question, but before that, give us some news about Midwest, because oftentimes from Europe, you get news from California and from the East Coast, which has been substantially hit, particularly New York in the last few weeks. But what about the Midwest? And in general, what is this pandemic bringing to universities?
So in general, Illinois is doing not so great. It's actually been very well prepared in terms of hospitals, which are actually not at capacity. So in that sense, it's going well, but the numbers are growing. I think after New York, New Jersey, the one very highly hit, then there's Massachusetts, and then there's Illinois. And the numbers are still going up, especially because this crisis hitting a lot the Afro-American community and the Latin community, which are very condensed in the Chicago city. So I'm afraid, we are really in the eyes of the storm. And as a university, this is actually something that as the university, I have to start revisiting also what they're doing or how they're doing better. For example, there's this federal university like Northwestern, this private university, very rich with a lot of endowment. They also pride themselves about everything is very well planned. So parents pay very high fees, or students that come to the Kellogg School pay very high fees, but in exchange what they're promised is an experience which is like clockwork. Everything is well done, everything is well planned, every student is very well taken care of. And this has created, as you can imagine, as everywhere, I'm sure as in Italy, total chaos in adjusting to unprecedented time. And this is why I think university need to start thinking in the future. They have to manage uncertainty much better. They have to manage an imperfect experience. We say at Kellogg that we prepare people to deal with disruption, and now we had to show ourselves that we knew how to deal with disruption. But the other thing is also starting thinking afterwards, because it's not too early to start thinking and where are we going. And although I think people crave for in-person delivery, I think there's more and more a recognition that we will need a more of a blended type of programs. Faculty has pivoted towards delivering online very, very quickly, and actually are discovering a lot of advantages in doing that. So although we want to go back in person, I think there's an interesting debate about what we can we do a more traditional basic course online and free up time of faculty for a more interaction, brainstorming type of experience.
And this is extremely interesting because these are the kind of discussions we are, of course, having also at Bocconi, and I'm sure also in Bicocca, because as you say, two very important things. First of all, less planning. We were used to probably too much planning, and complexity doesn't give you the opportunity to plan enough. And the second thing is blended education, this blended learning. again, no more polarization, but hybrid models, which probably are those that are more effective, of course, in periods of complex times. So let me ask you again, Francesca, what is, in terms of leadership, the biggest lesson? I mean, these are already two important lessons: less planning and less also use of physical think and blending with technology. But in terms of additional leadership lessons that you got so far from this important emergency plan that we have to put into practice?
Yes, so let me tell you, the irony was at Kellogg, we invented, or at least we think, we are the first one to start offering a crisis management course, which is actually compulsory for our students. We do it in executive education. We think it's really a trademark. And when I arrived as a dean, I did talk about that as a sign of innovation at Kellogg, and I joked, I hope I never had to, I hope I never have to attend the course and learn from it. Of course, last famous words. And so the first thing I did, I took the 3 faculty who teach this and created my own crisis management cabinet. And it was actually extremely useful, because some of the things they said, which was when you're pulled in 100 directions and people want all sorts of things of you and you can't, just stay true to your values. And I thought before, yes, of course I can do that. But then comes the crisis and everybody is really asking and demanding, and there's one emergency about the other. I think really one of the things of this crisis is that one of the mantra in crisis management is take your time, slow down, think about what you're doing. And of course you couldn't do it in this crisis because you had no time, you have to overreact. So that was one of the things was very useful to me. Every time I went to them, they reminded me, just think again, where is the goal of the long term? What have you announced as value? What have announced as your mission? So frame your answer in that question. It's been extremely useful. Because I actually thought, oh, I know I can do that. And then you're thrown in the middle of the crisis. I'm sure your experience is the same, and it's very different. So it's like this constant reminder and helping people to think. And the other thing has been communication. I don't know how many virtual town hall with students, with staff, with alumni, with the community at large I've been doing, and trying to be transparent, trying to explain everything. And it's been a learning curve, and I'm glad I have my cabinet.
And this is about, again, cooperation, and for sure task forces. Probably the notion of task force has become as much as popular as the virus itself, I guess, because everybody has developed task forces, and we have governments, of course, creating a number of task forces. And Giovanna, I think that many of these things, of course, occurred also during phase 1 at Bicocca. And you have, as you said, you are a generalist university. You have very important professors in departments in the School of Medicine and in departments related to biology. And so for sure they have contributed. But now, at least in Lombardy and Milan specifically, we are hitting the phase 2 and 3. And since May 4, we are finally back to work with smart working, but still we are starting work. And my question to you is how social sciences, so these other important, in addition to natural sciences, other important, set of sciences will contribute to phase 2 and phase 3?
I think, Gianmario, that this is really a key question, a strategic question, especially in Lombardy, because everybody knows that Lombardy is the richest region in Italy, among the richest and the wealth creation in Europe, and the economic crisis that we are facing is under the eyes of everybody living in Milan. So we are very worried about unemployment, about also inequality that will raise as a consequence of this pandemic. And I think that if we want to fix ideas and to avoid, very big problem in 6 months, in 10 months, we have to do something now. And I would really start, with the psychological impact of the pandemic on people. Social distance made a difference all over ages. So because all ages were, hit by this pandemic in the same way. But of course, if you are an adult, you respond to it in a different way than if you are a kid, or a teenager, or an elder guy. So we have to take care about the psychological effect, and I think this is a very, very key problem. So in Bicocca, we have a very good, one of the top department of psychology, and we are taking care about service for our community first, but also open to the public, to the citizens, to the Milan citizens, and we have really a lot of pressure to open even more and more, webinar, also just to talk about what is going on. And, this is very important. Another very important point is the unemployment, the workforce, how this will change. So, in Italy that in phase 2, among the people who is going back to work, almost 1 million employers, 75% will be men. So we'll talk about later, of course, of the gender gap, but now I want to underline that this will be a problem, because we know that among all the jobs that will be, burned because of this pandemic, most of them are jobs where women were working on that. So we have to be very, very careful. And of course, the strength of Lombardy is the medium and small enterprises, and we have to take care about what is going on there, about their international market. And also on this point of view, I think that social sciences and also sociology, we have also very good sociology department, and especially the work about, urbanistic sociology. And, the places and, what places means and what they will mean before empty, and little by little, more and more, with more people, and also how public transportation should be different in phase 2 and 3. And, one dream that I have, and as a researcher, I would really like to contribute to this, is to have in future a city, Milan, or a region, or a country, or a world where we do not have any more peak times. So not anybody going out at 7 a.m. and going back home at 7 p.m., but let's instead spread the workforce around the day. So as public university, I am discussing about the possibility to open Bicocca from 7 a.m. to 22 p.m. So to have, to avoid that my employers are on the tube or on train at peak time. So let's avoid the peak time. So let's do something really disruptive, innovative because of this pandemic. Let's build something good about it.
So I think that you are saying something very important, because from what Francesca was saying, we are already thinking about innovating in the development of courses in terms of infrastructure, so blended courses, digital technology plus physical, of course, in class interaction. You are saying something more, because it's also about the content. It's about bringing together different disciplines, and again, social sciences are broad areas of disciplines that altogether can really help us solve many of the problems, including the extreme problem mentioned by Francesca at the beginning, the fact that, for example, in US, this is hitting particularly the poorest part of the country, and so this is something pretty bad. There is actually an MBA student that is asking something interesting. Are you going to revisit the MBA curricula in your universities in order to adapt to the new normal? And let me get started. I'm constantly in touch, of course, with the dean of the business school at SDA Bocconi, and with the director of the MBA at SDA Bocconi. And of course, we are thinking about making changes like those that have been mentioned by Giovanna and Francesca. For sure, digital technology from September will be completely different from the past, because this has been an acceleration of this opportunity, I would say. And but it's also about changing and blending content. I don't know if you want to mention something about this changing the format of some of the courses that we are running. Of course, in Italy, it's pretty problem, because we need a number of approvals. In the US, probably there is more flexibility in terms of system, but we are discussing that. I don't know, Francesca.
Yeah, well, we were already thinking before, and now we accelerated a series of courses on AI, so on artificial intelligence, and management in the context of artificial intelligence. We will accelerate, because exactly as not only universities, but businesses have to handle much more with this type of digital. How do you manage that? We are introducing more courses in healthcare. Healthcare, of course, with this crisis became to the prominence, but also in the US, there are all the problems of people uninsured, of excessive costs. For example, when you see how much the university are losing in the US, if the university owns an hospital, they are losing 3 times as much. The hospital are losing terrible amount of money because nothing else but coronavirus is happening in it, and they are incredibly expensive machines. So we are introducing revision on healthcare, AI, and also just changing in the delivery. That is, we are trying to move, especially for the fall, because we might still have part virtual, the more traditional part of the teaching as a delivery online, which introduces capacity, and then have the single professor having more on a part in which is brainstorming, discussion about concepts, applications, to amplify the part experientials by cutting the cost on the part which is traditional delivery.
Interesting, very interesting. And Giovanna, were you, the $1 billion question, were you the Ministry of University and Research in Italy? What would you do in order to accelerate the innovation after the pandemic?
Well, I think, Gianmario, as you know, because we discussed many times about this, the key words here are which kind of investment our policymakers in Italy do in favor of the so-called tertiary education, so in favor of university. We are really except Greece, we are the last country in Europe because we spend only 0.3% of our GDP on tertiary education. So, I am director of a public university, and as a public university, we suffer a lot. Francesca before was mentioning a university who has hospitals. So I have hospitals, and I completely understand what you are talking about, because hospitals, they now basically became, now we are going out of it. But in these 2 months, hospitals were only COVID patients. So surgical issues, many issues were stopped because, of course, you don't want to have a mixture of COVID patients and non-COVID patients. But this means something that we have to pay, and we have to go out from it in months. So it's not easy to manage the exit from this. So really, social sciences in the sense of how to manage public hospitals is really a very key question in Italy. Especially for Lombardy region, who paid really, high cost, high number of deaths to this pandemic. But I think coming back to in which kind of research, if I were Minister of Education and of University, I would do. So first of all, I would finance more the system, but especially what I would, require is, and what would allow is more flexibility, because, I really believe that this pandemic shows really very well that interdisciplinary research is the answer, because we don't need just macrobiological answer or public health answer, but we need all together, economic, psychological, we need everything to solve this, to go out from this crisis. But as Gianmario was mentioning, in Italy, we have very strict rules about just the teaching, so the courses. So the courses needs to have a major, but this major is really major, is a monopoly, it's more major. So you need that 80% of the course belongs to that major. Now, let's not go into the details, but really the bureaucracy about this is really the huge problem of building up really new and innovative courses. And we are ready for it. Let's think about in artificial intelligence. Of course, in artificial intelligence, I have the top department of physics, I have informatics, I have mathematics, I have economics, I have biostatistics. That is really very important for artificial intelligence. But I can build a course if I cannot use, interdisciplinary areas in it. So, this is really all sustainability. Think about sustainability also in this sense. In Bicocca, I have, green chemistry. I have everything, all the ingredients to build. And it would be also very nice to build these courses with other university and also international university. But here, more and more you open, and more so you are ambitious, and more bureaucracy is trying, to kill you. So we have to solve this to give to the Italian universities freedom. Okay, more than flexibility, freedom.
I'm super sympathetic with what you say, because this is exactly the problem we have here in Italy and Europe in general, I would say, particularly continental Europe. I'm sure that, Francesca, things are different in US. I know that sometimes even universities organize double degrees, and then there is this minor and major system that was mentioned by Giovanna. In general, what would be, were you the architect of education in US, what would be the innovations you would introduce next year?
So there is one major issue, which is not the bureaucracy that has the university system right now in the US, which is how expensive it is, right? So before the crisis, people were giving me numbers that to graduate in admittedly the top private university, however, the tuition per year that you would pay for one student would be higher than the family income of the median family in the US. So that gives you an idea of how incredibly expensive it is. And because this crisis is so hitting less privileged people in a disproportionate way and is increasing the inequality, I think people are starting to discuss more about what can we do about the cost of education, and how can we streamline about that. Also because very often what the university are selling is the network, the stamp of approval that you go to a good university. And the more you're in this crisis and you can't network, the more people are complaining about where's my network? I went because of that. So I think there is a discussion going on about how can we make education more affordable and therefore more available to everybody, and that could be a great way to reduce inequality, and also a bit more on the focus on the learning. So it does go back to also content, if you want, because what we are also observing that once again, the discussion these days in the US, when you see the rankings, when you see how people discuss, it's all return on your investment, how much it costs, how much money you make after. And of course, if you have a privileged school with privileged children, that is going to look like amazing returns. Would that be the same for other people? So can we focus more on the learning and what are the practical implications of what we are doing for people? And I think that is a really difficult discussion, because of course, as everybody who's in academia knows, we academics don't like to be told you have to teach this or that or how, and I do understand that, because that's also you want to have freedom of inspire people, but we need to actually reopen that type of discussion. And finally, if I can discuss, the last thing is really humanities in the US are very, very suffering. And science, there's way more demand of people going in sciences, but this is the part which is making it very expensive, because of course faculty come, but they come with labs. So and these labs cost, millions or sometimes hundreds of millions in science. And that's good because we want that research, but therefore there needs to be more of a discussion of how do we finance these labs of fundamental research in science, which we want, which are incredibly important, but if we just subsidize them through tuition or a private donation, we are just making them, the university, too exclusive.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's interesting that, as usual, the old continent, Europe, has the problem of bureaucracy, and the new continent, right, has the opposite problem, too much of freedom, probably, that creates,
exactly.
So it's interesting that over the long term, the sustainable capitalism towards which hopefully we are going to go will balance a little bit the situation in both the sides of the Atlantic. There are very interesting questions that are being asked by our audience. There is a question on how universities can collaborate to overcome these limitations and problems, and I guess that example, talking like we are doing today, is a beautiful example. I don't know if you have ideas. Another important question is that the more education goes online, how can universities differentiate themselves? How can this question was Chicago can differentiate from Milan, for example. And taking this one, and then I'll leave it to you, one of the two questions that I just mentioned. I think that, again, campuses will always be crucial in universities because the level of service and the quality of interaction and networking that you can do physically is clearly a portion of the academic system. So I think that over the future, this blended notion means that there will always be a part which is physical, and this is a part that differentiates itself. Clearly, the more the world goes towards distance learning, and the commodity parts of distance learning can be become something which is standardized across different universities, and so this would give universities the opportunity to specialize on what they do better than others. And so I think this is something that will create a sort of division of labor across many universities and more collaboration, again, in order to create great programs for students all over the world. I don't know what is your take on these two questions, if you have any.
Yeah. So sorry.
Please go. No, please.
Yeah, I think, I have to repeat myself, but, having hard sciences and medicine, of course, not everything can be done online. So the blended e-learning absolutely is possible. We are doing it. So, for example, in the hard sciences lab, we are, cutting edges, the lab experience in pieces so that we can do things online, and then the students have the time to do some experiments or some thoughts, and then we move on. Okay, but of course in social sciences this is easier, even if it is not obvious. Also because we require really to every single professor in these universities. I have almost 1,000 professors. I have to ask to each of them to go online, and not everybody was happy about it, because if for our scientists or for a medical doctor it's not obvious to go online, but also for a philosopher, he needs to talk to his students, and this you can do it is online, but it's different if you are in presence. So what we have to avoid is to transform our system in a completely 100% online system. So the mixture between presence and online, we have to learn something about this. And so I think, for example, that also pedagogical studies will be very important, because we have to study how to teach in this new era, this new world. So also pedagogical issues, you were talking, Francesca, before about humanities, but also pedagogical issues and philosophy about pedagogy is really very, very crucial research in the future, because we have, faculty development means this, how to learn, how to teach in an excellent way in this new world. So I think that humanities may play a really crucial role to go to my medical doctors or chemistry and tell them, you should do not very long lessons, but to cut to 10 minutes. Otherwise, it's too hard, and you cannot write formulas for 2 hours. Many things that can be more or less obvious, but we need philosophers, and we need pedagogists in our future.
Sure. Francesca?
Yes, so I completely agree. I mean, if there's one thing that was good out for me out of what is happening in the crisis is, yes, people are realizing that courses online have a lot of advantages, and they're enjoying it, and they're better than expected, but they do crave personal interaction. They are craving it. And for me, exactly, it's great, because I have no intention to close down the campus and to become an MBA online. So if anything, I think this is actually reasserting the need of the personal interaction, which is also, the discussion which happens, which is not the managed discussion online, but the side comment, the little comment, people are actually appreciating where it makes the difference. So in my opinion, we will use more blended, but we will come out where my bet is people will stop, say, oh, the MBA in person or the university in person, it's going to die because online education is actually just as good. I think actually people will realize it's not the same. Can we get the best of both worlds? And in terms of cooperating with our other universities, I actually this is the part, however, that I find is good being virtual, is that all of a sudden, for example, I interview alumni from China. We have phenomenally senior alumni in China that people in Evanston don't know that much. In Chicago, they don't know because they don't have the time to come over or like now, right? I can reach out to my alma mater, Bocconi, and we can talk. So actually, distance is becoming less of a problem, because I think before this crisis, if I had said, oh, I'm going to interview this amazing alum, very inspirational online, people would have said, why, it's not in person, I'm not going to go. But after all this experience we've had, actually people notice that an interview online sometimes is almost even more personal, because you can see the person more closer in the face, you can see more of the inspiration. And to me, is actually making me reflect, I think to a certain extent, the global strategy as it used to be that some university in US did as a brick and mortar, let's build buildings. That is, in my opinion, gonna go down, but there's going to be much more of network and a global strategy done like that, because all of a sudden being far away, it's not such an obstacle, or at least that's also what I hope. But maybe we can do something with Bocconi more and with Bicocca. Yes.
Fabulous. So we have still a few minutes. We have wonderful questions coming in from many people that are interacting, and so we don't have time to tackle most of them. Some of them are also from students that are anxious to understand, for example, how we'll evaluate in periods like this one, which are clearly, of course, creating complications in the assessment and so on and so forth. But I guess that most of the universities are trying to do their best and are trying to use also systems that are coherent and compliant with the legal system, and not simply with the technological solutions that we can access in these days. Let me conclude on the question, which is the gender gap. So it was mentioned already before. Probably this pandemic will help us solve many things. There is a professor of Bocconi, Rosanna Taricone, that was just saying in US, as Francesca was saying, education and health are luxury goods. So possibly this pandemic will help solve these important problems. But there is another problem, which is this pandemic is creating. So the risk that many jobs related to women can, of course, be at risk. And more generally, we need a society which is more diverse. So what is your take? You guys have done a terrific career, and you now manage important institutions. And what is your learning from your experience, and what can still do to run the extra mile with this? Let's start with Giovanna, and then let's hear from Francesca. The US is, of course, more open to diversity since its origin. And so let's see what we're doing in Italy first.
In Italy, rectors is a position in the public university that is by election. So you need to be elected. So, the gender gap, we are 80 rectors in Italy, only 4 women. So 4 out of 80, and I am the director of the biggest university. So there is a cultural, of course, point. There is a cultural point, and maybe, Gianmario, I'm sorry if I tell this, but I think that in Italy, the social economic system is designed by men for men. Okay. And I am sure that if a woman will ever lead our country, she will design a world designed for everybody, men and women. because what is important is to let, equal opportunity for everybody. And just really, this pandemic shows that research is important, that competence is important. So, I was really hoping to see more women on TV talking about, safety issues or, health problems. Because if you go to an Italian hospital, 70% of doctors, medical doctors, are women, but only men talk. And if you go to, the bio world, and I see also my university, many of the microbiologists are women. But if you talk to, if you see a talk, only men talk. So what is going on? Is going that I think what we should, change. Because there are many women who says, we should, raise our hand and say, hey, I'm here, I'm ready to tell something, I have something to say. But, even though you do this, you need somebody ready to listen to what you are talking about, to what you want to say. So I think that women that, have a leading position, as I have the privilege to have, we have really to stand for this. This is really important. So before becoming a rector, I was not really into this, gender issues. I was not very, into it. But now I understand it is important that I make some points, not for me, but for the younger women who want to do some career, want to do something, and maybe they are afraid that even if they show up, nobody will listen to them. So what I want to say to students, female and males, that they have to talk to each other, they have to consider each other only for their, cleverness and intelligence and things that they are ready to say, to talk about with the others, regarding to their gender or religion or, family or whatever else. So I think that in Italy, we really need a cultural revolution, and we need to be ready for it, because in the new world, we really need to overcome. This is something that makes Italy a little bit, an old country.
These are very wise words, I must say, and reflect again the notion that we are part of the old continent, and there is an historical probably cage that is very hard to overcome. What about the US, Francesca?
Well, the issues, if you want, are the same, and I do really agree with Giovanna on the role model, right? And the students in the US are very vocal about that, both on gender and minority representation. So to the level that they will, even if within one course guest speakers are all men, they will complain. Or if there's whenever there's a speaker series, they will complain if they are all men. So we have to, and okay, it's my passion, I think it's right, but I couldn't get away with having a series of men. I would have the students up in arms, because they're really paying a conscious attention to these type of things. And it's also in small messages, like I arrived here from London Business School, and even at London Business School there was the traditional Women in Business conference, and I arrived here and it was called Gender Equity Conference. And I said, what is it about? And they told me, well, it's all the women in business, but we don't want to be, it's just women talking about themselves. It's about how we want the men also to be there and be part of the discussion. So it's a real push more and more, but the recognition that the role model is incredibly important. And the other thing I would like to stress is academic research actually is very good on that. I had incredible colleagues in the organization behavior department at London Business School, and now new one here in our manager organization department. They do study about women, because there's, they identify where's the bottleneck, what can we do? Again, research can inform this so that we can do it in a effective and systematic way. And just to finish, people pointed out to me that this crisis, we have to be careful, because it's going to hit women more than men, in the sense that all the children at home, all virtual at home, children are home to school, and that is going to be falling disproportionately on the time of women, and that we have to be conscious about that.
So this is absolutely true. So there is a cultural revolution to undertake, and academic research can support this by providing also important scientific evidence. As an economist, I also believe that incentives are important. Quotas, for example, in Italy, in board of directors have been extremely powerful to introduce women at the C-level in terms of opportunities. So I strongly believe that what you say is absolutely true. And let me conclude, given that it's 6 p.m. and we have actually 6 p.m. CEST, so of course it's 10 a.m. in Chicago and different time zones. I don't know what it is, but let me tell you that the good news is that the Gen Z is a great generation of students that are really into diversity, are really into sustainable capitalism, are really into the values that will make for sure the world much better. And so I think we are praising probably this kind of topics towards audiences that will listen and will implement many of the things that we just said. So let me conclude by wholeheartedly thanking Francesca Cornelli.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
And Giovanna Iannantuoni.
Thank you. It was really great. A really very good discussion. Thank you, Gianmario. Thank you, Francesca.
Again, apologies for those of you who have sent many questions, but I hope that we'll have the chance again to talk differently. And I hope, well, that at some point in time, we'll still be able to fly towards US and towards
meet in person, exactly. We are still craving it.
Bye-bye. Have a great day and evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks again. Bye.